My name's Tania Gill, and I'm a musician, and I live in Toronto. I am a piano player and improviser, composer, I guess often associated with the jazz community. And I'm also a board member of Music Declares Emergency and one of the organizers. I'm really happy you're all here. So I'll just pass the mic along to start, and people can just say briefly who they are, and then we'll start chatting about stuff.
Hi, my name is Singh. I'm an artist, composer, producer, and yeah, I think I'll just leave it at that. We got a big panel.
Is this mic working? Okay, cool. Hi, my name is Brighid. I am a musician and also part of Music Declares Emergency. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Liv Cazzola, and I'm an artist from Guelph, Ontario. I perform usually under the names either Tragedy Ann or The Lifers, and I'm also part of the board at Music Declares Emergency in Canada.
Hi, my name's Donna Grantis. I'm a guitarist, composer, improviser, and the project I'm working on right now fuses my passion for music with my passion for the environment. It's called Culture versus Policy.
My name is Tamara. I'm from a band called The Weather Station. I'm also a musician, touring musician. That's really it. I like to think about and talk about climate change.
Maybe I will, on the spot here, because create a question. Okay, so thanks for the support. For me, I got involved in, well, I've thought about various crises in the environment and climate change for a long time, but in 2018, when I read the IPCC report, I guess the thing was I thought at a certain point that people working in that field and activists were doing the work that was needed, and then I really hit me so strongly that no, it's not, they're not succeeding, we're failing, I need to do more. And at that time, I started helping organize rallies. So I'd go to climate strikes, and what can I do as a musician? I'd find my friends who play horns and say, let's play in the march. And then I wound up helping organize the strikes themselves logistically. I know some people, I can get us a stage, I can get us a sound system, I know some great musicians. We can probably get them to play at the rally. And so that was the work I was doing before I then, and through that met Kim Fry from Music Declares Emergency. I mean, it hadn't formed yet. Well, Kim and I knew each other before, but following the big climate strike of 2019, we decided to create a Canadian chapter of Music Declares Emergency, along with another musician, Carolyn Brooks, and with Brighid. But for me, I guess where I'm going with this is when I play music, I think I'm thinking a lot about music, I'm thinking about does this have a good groove? What kind of high or low registers are in this as a piano player? What am I adding? Or, I'm thinking about music the way I do, and I don't write lyrics for songs. So there's one part of me that's a musician. There's another part of me that has been an activist and an organizer, and I admire people who can bring those things together in their work. I guess people who write words have an advantage there. But I was wondering if people want to speak about the experience of trying to bring your concerns about the climate crisis in the world into your work.
I have an idea. Can instead of me being a speaking head, can I just play something? I have my sampler all laid up here. So this is a piece with recordings from Fairy Creek, which are Pechadat lands, Nechana-speaking peoples. And for those of you that may not know, it's one of the few old-growth forests we have left in so-called Canada. And I'll play you just a little bit of the field recording and then just a little piece of the composition, because this is how I've found as of recent to be able to fuse my artistry with the things that I care about. I've also been the sound person at many a rally, so I feel you there. So what I did is I took the songs of thrush, the songs of robin, and the songs of endangered western screech owl, and I tempered them on a keyboard and made this little thing.
That was really beautiful. I love that music has this way of kind of meshing with nature in a way that is, in my mind, an extension of nature through this particular species that we are, and the way that you were able to incorporate sound in its natural state with sound in an altered state was very touching. Yeah, I've never actually done that with combining two. I've done a little bit of combining some nature sounds into my songs, and whenever I do, it grounds me in that really, really well. So thanks for sharing what you did there. Has anyone else ever actually sampled a bit of nature in their music?
Yeah.
Yeah? What have you done?
Oh, it was a long time ago.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I mean, I have to leave at 2, so I appreciate your question, and I think it's so interesting because I think so many things are so difficult about this issue, and yet all of the things that are difficult about it are things that can be opportunities if we look at it differently. For example, how multifaceted and enormous climate is intimidating. And we all experience feelings of, what can I do? I can do nothing. Or thinking that whatever we're doing is the wrong thing. Because it's all, it's so multifaceted, it requires so many different solutions. So I think as an artist, it's the question of, what can I do? What should I do? And actually, there's so many different answers to that question. And I think that what's beautiful about it is that we can all enter this with what we have to offer, and then we can all do something to make a change that's aligned with what we have to offer and what we can do. For myself, I think that music, for me, is about interrogating truth, interrogating emotion, and interrogating experience. And I find that the song wants me to push through my own misunderstandings to something deeper. So I think with climate, because we have so many narratives about it, there's a lot of work we all have to do to understand our own gut feelings and to work through it. And I think for me, that was sort of the first step, is when am I coming from a place of ego? When am I coming from a place of bias? How do I work through my own confusion? And I ended up making a bunch of music that very much is about my own confusion. And to me, that was sort of the statement in a way. But I think that everything is a valid statement, and the important thing is to be talking about it and to be addressing it and to be ending the silence about it.
It's bringing to mind one thing that my band did on one of our tours. We called it the Sweet Intentions Tour, and we brought a book that we bound, and it was the Book of Sweet Intentions, and a lot of our music has a lot of nature imagery as well as addressing the climate crisis directly. And so we invited the audience, once we kind of started the conversation through song, we passed around this book and invited everybody to write down an intention that the music was bringing up for them. And we didn't read it until the end of the tour, but it was really beautiful to see the things that were going on in people's minds. And I found it really powerful to just kind of see that all in one place and really feel the heart within that. So that, for me as an artist, gave me a lot of hope. And I think as the audience members, it gave them a sense of community within those feelings. So I don't know, that was a nice way to kind of incorporate those two feelings within ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of dread answering your question in a way. I get asked about it a lot. I'm relatively new to making music. Being a younger person. And I've also had the threat of the climate emergency hanging over me my whole life. Because it's been this generally widely accepted disaster since I was a kid. And I've had trouble writing about it, honestly, because it is I think I have trouble writing about it in the same way, or due to the same reason that so many people have trouble taking it seriously, which is I'm not directly experiencing the effects of it every day. So when people ask me, oh, well, what have you written about climate? It's hard for me to answer. I've written a couple things, but for me, I've ended up writing more about almost the causes of climate change, of capitalism and patriarchy, which are directly related and, in a way, the cause of climate change, because those are things that I can, in different, formats, but those are things that I can experience directly every day. And so it is definitely about pushing through that kind of confusion and I don't even know what, to find a way to process something so big and overarching as the climate emergency in my music. I'm still figuring that out. So, yeah, which is something me and Donna have talked about before, actually. So, yeah.
As a musician and songwriter, I think in writing anything, whether it's a chord progression or a melody or even thinking of a tempo or a drum beat, it all stems from, how does this make me feel, or how might this make other people feel something? And there's a book that I read a couple of years ago called The Future We Choose by Christiana Figueres and Tom Rivet-Carnett. And Christiana is one of the architects of the Paris Agreement, and I read that book 3 times. I just found it to be so insightful and eye-opening. And there were certain passages, many passages that I highlighted and went back to, and I was rereading and just taking it in. And then at a certain point, I thought, what would these words sound like if there was a soundtrack of music to support them and to highlight them? And that's really the basis for the next project that I'm thinking about and how I'm approaching songwriting. Because, some people might look, for example, at a graph and have a real emotional response to it. Some people might watch a movie and be really affected that way, and for others, it's sound and music. And I think it's our job to put together, tones and textures and melodies and have that communicate something. And hopefully with an underlying message, it might cause some, or inspire or spark some reflection or new ideas.
Beautiful. Yeah, I think just to echolocate myself, I'm coming in from the stolen and occupied lands of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. And as kind of one of the things that really resonated and has resonated from listening to Mr. Suzuki, Dr. Suzuki, speak for years at this point, from being a kid to from the nature of things, is about settler connection to land. And what does that mean, in unpacking that? Because when we break it down to values and we start to look at that values and his emphasis and the growing emphasis of Indigenous values to take us forward, the idea for me was to examine how me, as a migrant, as a settler on stolen Indigenous territories, what is my relationship to land? How am I honoring this land, if I am in any form at all? Or am I just occupying and coming from a capitalist patriarchal paradigm and just reaping from it and reaping from it? And so this kind of spun me on into a web of thinking about music as these textures, as these tones that connect us. And ideally, with the music that I'm making right now, is that it takes settler society and pushes a connection to the natural world, to the more than human. We have been anthropocentric, human-centric for far too long on these lands. And again, I'm speaking to settler society here. What my hope is, I have a couple different projects that really are all starting to be informed by the natural world that I'm surrounded by. This is kind of the more ambient side, and if you're here in the evening, you'll hear the more hip-hop side of that. And so I've been allowing my imagination to run wild, too. I've been writing raps from the perspective of orcas and ravens, and just really letting imagination unfiltered. Like, how do I connect? How do I help? How do I maybe make a vehicle for other people to connect as well?
Is there another question? Yes. Or? No, I don't have more questions. Do you want to ask a question? We're just talking. Go ahead.
No, I mean, I think there's so much that's important to talk about, and as artists, I think something I've been thinking about in terms of this is an industry event, and we all, something that climate has actually led me to as a person that I'm so grateful for is the concept of systems thinking, which is that everything needs to be understood within a context, and everything is a system. Nothing is necessarily one individual problem that needs to be solved. Everything is connected. And obviously that's what nature teaches us all the time. But it also shows up here, and I think often what I've experienced in trying to engage with this as an artist, or trying to encourage other artists to engage with it, is that there's a fear of a punitive response to showing up, because that does happen all the time with this issue. And I don't think that anyone here needs to be punished. I think that what we need to do is transform and change systems, and I think we need to understand each other. So everything that we're all doing is all happening because of something else. So if you're a label and you're putting out a record, that's because you need to, I think that we can all understand our own context and each other's context accurately, and then we need to go about changing or altering the systems that cause certain things to happen. Like, for example, the difficulty with artists and sort of being expected to tour or being expected to fly to distant locations to go to conferences. We all, as industry, we all could think about what to emphasize and what to de-emphasize and what to support and what to maybe support a little less. And I think artists need a lot of support, as does everyone, to engage with this. For example, if artists want to not fly as much, promoters and festivals could come together to make it so that, you know, an artist could come to a region and stay there instead of having a radius clause actually exclude that from happening. So it's all these little things and all of these systems that we can look at with love and acceptance and care rather than from a punitive standpoint, and we can think about what we could do. That's my speech.
Appreciate it.
Yeah. It's an excellent one. It makes my mind go about 10 different directions at once because it's really full. I like thinking about a perspective that allows you to think of systems is helpful, because sometimes you can get, you know, like part of me goes, I'm on stage, all Ontario municipalities are having an election on Monday. We should all be voting for climate champions. You know, I want to say this out loud, and and
That's a good thing to say.
but it's an interesting thing because you go, well, if I was playing a show, would I say that? Maybe I would. You know, I mean, but that's again, you know, it's part of a system. It's not. I don't know. There are a lot of things to always be putting together. But anyways, we should all be voting. Of course, if you're here, you probably are. But Donna, do you want to jump in? Oh, Tamara has to leave. Thank you so much. Tamara Lindeman of the weather station.
One thing that that really resonated with me during David Suzuki's keynote address was the idea of what is it that we value?
Yes.
And what we value is expressed in culture by the clothes we wear, the food we eat, the music we listen to, the holidays we celebrate, all of these things. And music is a part of that. One of the things that I'm interested in exploring, this maybe is a question or a talking point, is for everyone here working in the music industry, what is truly going to fuel change? Is it the bottom line in terms of financials and money and, you know, is it exclusively sales? Is it a strong moral belief that things should change and that is the priority? Is there a way to balance both? Like, what is truly going to be the thing to, I mean, everybody here, I'm sure we want the change. And it's so many small steps, but what is really going to drive us? Is it top-down policies with, you know, some type of framework in terms of, you know, emissions reduction targets? How is that being, you know, accounted for? What is really going to be the driver? I think it's everything, but I would be interested in just hearing about that from everyone. Because I'm curious. I think it's a balance of many things, but how do we really get to the other side, and what would that look like? I think it would be really amazing and really exciting.
Well, I like what you said about how it is everything, because as a lot of people have said today, there's so much that we can learn from nature, and in nature there's an ecosystem where one change affects another and one change affects another, and it's all so connected. So as artists, we're just one of those voices, one of those changes within this whole. And so part of why I was really excited about this event is because there are people here from so many different sections of what we're calling an industry, which can also be called a community, which can also be called an ecosystem. And because we're in this room together, we can share those ideas and scale up some things that are starting in a grassroots level, and make things that are currently more accessible for bulk orders, accessible for more smaller independent artists like myself. So I love the idea of it being everything and anything combined. Mm-hmm.
When you mentioned top-down change, and then we think of how everybody's actions affect everything around them, and those things are all true. And then I think analyzing where change occurs, and also talking about setting your intention, like what's going to motivate you to change. I was reminded of the panel on green touring that happened at Pop Montreal that I was able to be part of, and I missed the one this morning. I might be repeating some things that were said there, but I know ACT, which is an organization in Quebec that consults with artists about how to green their tours. The first thing they do is have a meeting with everybody involved in a project and make it speak out loud about the intention that this is going to be a priority, that we do this in a way that, well, however they set their priorities, because they're, to do with recognizing the climate crisis or honoring, amplifying efforts if you're not an Indigenous person of the work being done by those people, or if it's whatever the intention is that's helping us make the change we need. So that one, I just was thinking how it's interesting that there's now an organization promoting that idea, and they're also offering, ways for people to measure their carbon impact. And then there are things like Creative Green Tools Canada offering these ways for us to measure our carbon impact. So you can set your intention, and then with these larger organizations collecting data, they can also influence levels of government. Maybe we can get grants where festivals are being required to report. I don't know, was this said this morning? Marie Zimmerman from Hillside, I know, mentioned to me in a conversation once, she said when festivals around Ontario all had to report on accessibility, all of the festivals became far more, in order to get grants. Then all the festivals had to deal with it to get the grants they needed to operate, and they all dealt with it. And for her running this zero carbon festival, she didn't get any reward for all the work they had done to make Hillside a zero carbon festival. But if it was a requirement from the granting organizations, then every festival would be looking at it, and they'd probably all find out about Green Tools Canada, and they'd all be measuring their carbon footprint and looking at, okay, how do our audiences travel here, and and then, so I think it's true that localized activity like what the roots of Hillside can, feed into something like these conversations, and now Green Tools Canada's here, and then we can start, maybe getting granting organizations, and I don't know if we have any politicians here today, but, who's that? So I actually had a question. Okay.
What do you see as a grant agency's role in helping to support these initiatives? And some of the more obvious ones you've mentioned when it comes to larger organizations, but we're always conscious of requirements that we also place on individual artists that are already, as many people have said, counting those pennies. So how do we balance sort of making certain demands on artists or arts organizations around these environmental concerns, and yet also realizing the pressures that puts on, or what should we be doing? What is our role?
Thank you so much. I'm so happy you're here and asking that question. It's pretty great. I don't know that I think we could all maybe offer some things. The one thing that comes to my mind is if I'm booking a tour, if I could in a budget line say we're going to travel by train, it's going to cost however much more money. Can we ask for that in the grant operating budget? That sort of a thing, where there could actually be a place to fund things that are a little more expensive to do, but they have a far lower carbon footprint. Because people want to choose to do those things, but they don't have the money. So that would be wonderful. And it would be seen as a requirement in reporting, but also it would be felt as a support, I think, for artists, because I think many artists are thinking about this all the time anyways. Anyone else want to say something?
I feel like something that's coming to my mind right now is just knowing that a tour in general is really expensive to put together. So let's say let's say the tour, without thinking about climate, would cost $10,000. Typically, to make sure that that same tour can be a lot more mindful, whether it be a train or some other way of getting around, whether it be incorporating some sort of incentives for the audience, it takes additional labor and it takes additional costs. So I'm wondering even if it would make sense to have, say, $10,000 available for a national tour grant, but if you are putting in climate initiatives, you get an additional $3,000 or something like that to help fund specifically that part of the project. I don't know, just an idea.
Yeah.
I think also, having sat on various juries for Canada Council, especially the public outreach, we were enthralled when we'd see an application come through where a festival was really making the effort to reduce its ecological footprint. And in that way, it's also the individual artist, again, is not necessarily who's responsible for that when we're rolling through to these festivals, but then the festivals are setting themselves up. And it's not just maybe even taking it a step farther, not, hey, if you do this at this regular price, you do this at this price. It's actually, we're in this world now. Like, we are living in this world now. I'm coming from BC, where a year ago we had floods, and now we've seen the longest drought. It rained yesterday. And so our food is going to be screwed for 5 years. Like, we're not going to get back to food production to where we were previous to last year. So I like the idea of bold steps of requirements for funding, especially if you're taking public tax dollars, because that's all of our money. And if that's going to something, it needs to be directed in bold steps, because that's, well, what we need.
I'm 19. I don't understand money.
Yeah, fair enough.
What time are we at?
I'm 45 and I don't either.
I'm curious to know what time we're at.
We have like 5 minutes.
We've got about
3
5
minutes? I think some people down there should talk.
Yeah,
I
totally.
had a quick thing to add for what you were saying. I love the idea of requirements. And I think maybe another thing that the OAC could do to help support people who haven't started doing some of this research is just put together kind of a resources list for different kinds of ways that they need to kind of start rethinking things. And maybe that's even hiring a specific staff person to help walk them through that step.
I really enjoyed the presentation about fast fashion. Not enjoyed it in terms of the content, but enjoyed it in terms of how informative it was. I have been digging for some eco-friendly merch options. I think that I would like to believe that if most artists were given the choice of, you can create environmentally friendly, sustainably sourced merchandise or not, that they would. So I think there's a huge business opportunity there. And I would love to not only see that, but also in terms of shipping, and boxing, packaging, all of that kind of stuff. The options definitely exist, eco-friendly mailers and whatnot. How do we totally transform this industry? There's huge opportunity. I really hope that it happens quickly. Yeah.
Just one comment, and just because I think it's so important to the question you asked. It's requirements for large organizations that are very different from independent musicians that need a lot more things like help with mailing, and like those individual touring things versus versus those large organizations or festivals and stuff. Because often it gets rushed with one stroke. And I think really taking close to the scale is really important.
What's that? Okay. Thank you for those comments in the audience. I think we're wrapping it up.
I think we are too. And I think there's an opportunity here. I know we all hate Post-its, but there's a lot of great ideas going around, and some folks, especially those who spoke off mic, were not really adequately recorded and transcribed into the transcript of today's event. I know that the person from the Ontario Arts Council is really keen to know everyone's ideas and answers to that question. So I'm just going to pop these here. The question was, what new ways of thinking and models of funding are you curious and excited about? We're going to take about a 10-minute break. Before we do, we're going to thank these wonderful panelists.
Donna Grantis.
Yes,
Oh.
please go.
Donna Grantis. Donna Grantis, pretty exciting. Everyone, very exciting. Liv Cazzola, amazing. Brighid Fry. Woo. And Ruby Singh. Amazing. My name's Tania Gill. Thanks.